Hey, how we doing? Everybody good? Any questions or observations about your experience just now? About whatever was going on there?
I was surprised that it was dark when I opened my eyes.
You surprised that it was dark?
When I opened my eyes.
Yeah.
The nighttime's better. No sun damage.
The time just kind of disappears.
Actually, my late first wife, Maggie, once went on actually I think a couple of times, she went on a solo retreat at this retreat place on a property up in Connecticut or upstate New York. And once you checked into this place, I went to this place once at a different time. You come in with some groceries and that's it. You're on your own. There's like 130 acres and 3 cabins, and you don't see anyone. You're totally on your own. I think the second day she was there, it snowed, and she was completely snowed in. And the sky was completely gray. And she was on, totally on retreat, in silence. I mean, you're in solitude. There's no one to talk to. So the silence kind of is completely natural. And you're just meditating pretty much around the clock. And she'd be sitting there meditating, and everything was very gray and dark. And she'd be meditating, and after a while, she'd start experiencing, oh, it's light. And she'd think, oh, I guess the sun is finally broken through. And then she'd open her eyes and she'd realize, no, it was still dark and gray out there. The light was in here. The one thing that's really the only important question to ask about this is, are we getting there's a lot of questions that there are a lot of questions that are not important to ask, that people very often ask themselves about their meditation, that they think are important, like, did you have a lot of thoughts, or did you have few thoughts? Absolutely unimportant. Did you feel happy or sad or this way or that way? Absolutely unimportant. The only important question is, whatever was going on, whatever was coming and going, did you get the naturalness of just being with it? Just being, not resisting anything, not holding on to anything, not trying to make anything happen, not trying to prevent anything from happening, just letting go into it. And even then, sometimes we're going to, if I can just get rid of this nuisance thought, or if I can just hold on to, I felt so kind of nice and tranquil 5 minutes ago and it's gone away. If I can just try to get back to there. And of course, sometimes you're going to try to accomplish those things. That's okay. That's also part of the process, because then you get to find out that doesn't work. You have to try some of this stuff for a while till you really become good and convinced that it doesn't work. It's never going to work. And then more and more you just utterly give up.
And how do you reconcile that with sometimes you have a better, what I'm going to say you judge to be a deeper or less contaminated, I don't know, I'm just using, I know we're concerned about words,
Yeah.
But
Less turbulent.
Yes,
Mm,
less turbulent.
Less turbulent,
experience.
more tranquil experience. Yeah, oh sure. That happens to everyone. Sometimes it's a more tranquil experience, sometimes it's a more turbulent experience. Absolutely. The question is, how do you make it turbulent? How do you make it tranquil? You don't know, do you? Neither do I. Because you don't do it. It's out of your freaking control.
I did notice one thing recently where, and I've noticed this before as an athlete.
Wait, just what? Let me just say, it's
Yeah.
out of your control, and also it doesn't matter. Because the point of this is not, okay, I got rid of my turbulence. Now everything's cool. Certainly it's more pleasant subjectively when we feel very settled and tranquil. Oh, it's very pleasant. When that happens, great, God bless. But the deeper truth here, the deeper cognition, is exactly what the Buddha expressed when he got it. He's the model of this. He's the exemplar. What did he say after all that time? First, the years of meditating and trying this and trying that, and giving up on this, giving up, and then finally sitting down under the tree, and at the end he gets it. And does he say, how wonderful, I finally pacified all my turbulence? No. He says, and it's on record, how wonderful, everything's fine the way it is. That's what's important, is that we get just being with the turbulence, if it's turbulence. Just being with the tranquility, if it's tranquil. Just being with the thoughts, if there's thoughts. Just being with the absence of thoughts, if there's absence of thoughts. None of that is important. It's really important to know this, that none of that is important. Because otherwise, there's some goal.
Is it moving to acceptance in a way?
Yeah, we can say moving to acceptance. I don't like even that word moving to, because
Yeah,
then,
I like
okay,
your
now our new goal will be
Oh,
acceptance.
I see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And there's going to be part of you not accepting it. Fine, we accept that.
What I've noticed is, and I noticed this
Yeah.
as an athlete too before, is that is in a state sometimes in a natural flow of moods
Mhm.
that I find myself sometimes in a mild depression.
Mhm.
And went into mild depression just recently. I became aware of that I was very present, because a lot of time even when I'm meditating, I love to meditate as you're teaching,
Mhm.
but I feel I'm in the moment, but somewhere on the periphery of my awareness, there's hopes, there's dreams, there's aspirations, there's ruminations about the past. They're there on the horizon, somewhere in my awareness. And when I'm a little depressed, I drop all that sometimes. But it feels really cool to
Interesting.
do it, and
Yeah.
it tends to pull me out of it. But for the moment I'm in it, I recognize that I am more just with what is.
Very interesting. This the Dharma of depression. Yeah. Hang on just a second, Laurie. Let me get to you next. I want to go with this for a minute. Yeah, but it's very interesting because there you've given up hope.
Yeah,
You've given up
that's
hope.
right.
So try this. And when I say try, there's two meanings to the word try. One is make an effort. That's not what I mean. The other try is put this to trial. Do this experiment. Try. Don't wait for the depression to come to give up hope. Okay? Some of you have heard this story before, but I'm going to tell it again. Imagine how many times I've heard it. But it's because it was just so brazenly instructive, deeply, profoundly instructive for me. And it was when Maggie, my first wife, was in the hospital dying of cancer. And she got a call from a friend connected with a Buddhist community that we were connected with at the time. And And he said, okay, Maggie, I've been hustling, I've been on the phone. I think I can get these monks to come to your hospital room, and they'll come down to New Jersey and they'll chant this stuff from the Bardo Thodol for you. And you know, and she said, oh, really, thanks a lot, but no, that wasn't my practice during my life. And it wouldn't be authentic for me to do now. And he said, well, what is your practice? And she said, my practice is just being without hope or fear. Right? There it is. Just being without hope or fear. Now, everyone wants to be without fear. I mean, I wrote a whole book about that, right? Fearless. If I'd really had some chutzpah, I would have titled it Fear Less, Hope Less. Right? But that would have been... I once tried to sell my publisher. I tried to pitch him a book that would be called... what would it... I wanted to make it like the last self-help book. It was going to be called No Self, No Help. And he said, and my publisher said, no sale. That was 20-something years ago. Maybe we're getting, maybe the public's getting, you know what? It needs to be sweetened a little. No self, no help, no sweat. Maybe that would work. Anyway, so yeah, everyone wants no fear. But no hope? Wait a minute. We're told keep hope alive. Well, yeah, all this stuff's provisional. At a certain point, you know, at the graduate school level, which is what we're trying to do here, we look at this. We want to look at this stuff clearly. And what we see is that hope is the flip side of fear, because they're both an investment in a particular outcome. They're both wagering our okayness, our sense that things are okay. Things will be okay if there's this outcome and not that outcome. That's a definition of hope or fear, right? I hope I get better. I fear I'll stay sick. Right? I hope whatever. I hope the tsunami doesn't come. I hope it stays dry. I fear the tsunami will come. Right? One of the great advantages of being clear-eyed about this stuff is we find out that when we give up hope or fear, it has no effect on whether the tsunami comes. People are afraid of giving up their hope because it's such a habit. We have this magical thinking that somehow that keeps the stuff at bay. And it doesn't.
I find it more as like a motivating tool. Like hope is a motivating tool.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that you want the particular outcome, but just the motivating to continue, to keep going.
Right, and that's the usual human way of functioning. You're absolutely right. For 90-something% of people, that's you have that emotional investment that things will turn out this way, and we need that to motivate us to do the stuff. At the more graduate, postgraduate level, and those of you who were we did a couple of months ago, we did the day-long retreat here on the Bhagavad Gita. And this is like the central theme of the Bhagavad Gita, is that at the more advanced level, you see what needs to be done, and you just do it without attachment to the outcome. You still do the same stuff. You see, okay, this is the right way to go, and you do it, and then what happens. It's not even letting the chips fall where they may. It's seeing that the chips are gonna fall where they fall. We don't have that power of letting them or not letting them. That's at the more advanced level. And most people are they right, okay, YouTube friends, you cover your ears for this part, right? If you're not ready to give up hope, that's fine. No one's going to pressure you. But, you know, a lot of this stuff, if it seems too challenging, if you say, okay, this is it, I'm going to give up hope. Try giving up hope for a day. Say, okay, on the odd numbered days, I'll have all the hope and fear I want. On the even days, every time I realize I'm hoping, I'll just let it go. See which works better.
But as you say, it's still taking action with
Yeah.
an intent to take the right action.
By my
you know?
definition, that would be the difference between a severe depression, no more action, or a mild depression, still functioning through discipline or whatever, still functioning and still going through it. But the thing is, it's just like a very kind of sober, no fa la la, and
Yeah.
or a more
Yeah.
a very sober kind of, and which feels very grounded to me. Just
Yeah.
like all the senses wide awake, and there's no other.
Yeah, and I like your use of the word sober there. That's like,
It's very
that's
sober.
primo. It's, you know, it's not fa la la and it's not. It's just clarity, and what happens. And this is my experience, and I know that, you know, we've talked about this before. You've all had this experience, that the more you're functioning just in that clarity, without a lot of, attachment and hope and fear and a lot of agendas and stories and all these kind of emotional circuits kicking in, that stuff. It crowds your windshield, right? And the more it's just that soberness, that sobriety, without the distraction of that, you see more clearly what needs to be done. And you see more clearly that that's going to be the best outcome for yourself and the other beings involved if you do that. And also you see more clearly what's the most effective way to bring it about. You know, and it's easier to see in other people. Always easier to see, you know, think of the other people around you who, and I know you know people like this, where you can see they're caught up in a particular emotionally charged story about something. That whenever it comes to like dealing with these relatives, right? That they've got a whole emotionally charged story that they've practiced for a long time, so everything they do is with reference to that story, and it keeps them from seeing clearly what's going on and what's the most effective way to deal with it. And also sometimes from seeing that person maybe has changed. You get a whole story going about, oh, this person is like this. And in fact, when the shoe's on the other foot, you've experienced people doing it to you? They're still relating to you like you're like you're still the 16-year-old that they knew when you were 16, and it can feel very frustrating. Can't you see I'm not that one anymore? Yeah, Sue Ellen?
People do that in relationships a lot because you have these points.
Yes, speak up for the
I
mic.
think people do that in relationships a lot because you have this common point in reference. Maybe at one point there was some accuracy to it, but you end up trapping the person in what your story is about them rather than seeing.
Yeah. Yeah. In relationship, marriage or, partnering, if you play it right, it's such an incredible opportunity to see this stuff, to, have the relationship as the, what's going on out there? As the mirror of your stuff and of how you're functioning. And to see, because if you're doing stuff with like the people at work or some, the scale in which it plays out, the playing field can be kind of big. It can kind of takes a little while sometimes for the recriminate, you send out this email and then that thing happens and a week later and but were they referring, whereas, in partnership, it's right there, the instant karma. right? You flick the cigarette ash out the window, boy, it flies right back in your face. It's great. We were, Yafa and I were on a retreat once with Adyashanti, and someone asked some question about marriage. And, you know, Adya is married. Those of you familiar with Adyashanti, his wife, Mukti, who's a teacher in her own right, a Dharma teacher. And someone said something, I forget, but I think something kind of real blissy about, oh, marriage, you know, for people who are doing this kind of Dharma practice must be such bliss. And he said, he actually was quoting Joseph, yes, Joseph Campbell. He said, marriage is a crucible. You know, and I thought about that later. My first reaction was, wow, that's pretty harsh. But, you know, when I thought about it later, what is a crucible?
You make something of it.
Sorry?
You make something of it.
Yeah, a crucible. Literally, what is a crucible?
It's a pot to melt.
Yes, it's a pot that you put over the fire and you melt down metal. Right? And the point of it is, so, you know, the first part that I got, whoa, marriage is like being in the fire. And it is part of it. But what it's doing is in a crucible, you melt down the metal and then you scrape off the impurities, scrape off the dross. It's for purifying metal. Right?
If you use multiple metals, they would combine.
Or yeah. So you're getting to the. Let's go with my version of the metaphor for a minute, because it's going to support the.
But that adds to it. I mean, you're
Yeah.
combining things and then.
Or you combine, yeah, you can combine, okay, my metal and your metal, or yeah, or we can we can think of it in terms of purifying out the stuff like the old tendencies to freeze people and stereotype them in this, you know, whatever state they were in before. My old teacher Maharishi used to say this. God, I must have heard him say this 100 times. He said, the past is always a lesser state of evolution. Right? The past is always a lesser state of evolution. We're always evolving. Right? And so anything, any memory, any impression, every impression that you have of your partner or anyone else is an impression from the past. It's not, you know, like when people show you a photo and they say, well, this is a picture of me when I was younger. Every picture is a picture of you when you were younger. Maybe 5 seconds younger. It's all past. It's all dead. Yes, Sue Ellen. You look agitated. Go. Go, girl.
I have that tendency. Do you mean is evolving in your mind the same thing as improving? Because sometimes it seems like people, you know, just dig in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some do.
Some do.
Does
Some
that mean
do.
they still are evolving? Are they having?
In the big picture, yeah. In the big picture, you know, it's like you go, oh, they were going forward, then they're going backward. You know, we can all, I'm sure, tell stories about examples of that sometimes in our own life. But in the bigger picture, if you stick around long enough to see the bigger picture, the parts where you're going backwards, turns out it's because you're going around some big rock. And in the bigger picture, it's to go forward. I think it has to be. I mean, my sense of it is it must be like that. Because in the bigger picture, the biggest picture, what's going on here is that beingness is coming to know itself. Awareness is coming to know itself. And in order to do that, it creates all this manifestation, you know, and all this stuff is represented in these kind of stories and various, you know, cultures. It's you know, God dreams the universe. You know, God gets lonely, quote unquote, right? There's being. Where did everything come from, right? We've talked about this before. You know, as little kids, you go, okay, everything has to come from somewhere else. And, you know, but where does the first thing come from? Where does the first thing, how do we make the first step from nothing to something? And then you know, so you go to school and you find out, oh, there was a big bang. Or you go to Sunday school and you find out, well, it starts with God. But where does that come from? How do we get from once you have a big bang, that's easy. Then you got hydrogen and helium and the whole periodic table, and they combine and recombine, and we get galaxies and animals, vegetables, minerals, all of that. That's. But how do we get that first? How do we get from nothing, from emptiness to form? It's impossible. It's impossible. Yes, it's impossible. And the only resolution of that is we don't go from emptiness to form. All this form is emptiness in drag. And that's the great E equals MC squared of Buddhism from the Prajnaparamita Sutra. Form is no other than emptiness. Emptiness is no other than form. And then immediately people start looking for loopholes, so it restates it. Form is exactly emptiness. Emptiness is exactly form. Right? So, what's that have to do with the big picture we were talking about? If we look at it, okay, in emptiness there's no time, there's no space. There's no qualities. There's no individuals. There's no you or me or up or down, male or female, past or future, old or young, or any of that. And this is where people often say, oh, it's voidness. It's emptiness. But then even that sounds like a quality. You know, especially, oh, it's emptiness. That's so scary. No. Now you're giving it an attribute, empty of that even. Okay. But we're going to the meat of the big stuff here, just for a minute. Because emptiness has no attributes, it has no boundaries. It has, therefore, we could say no limits. No limits. Therefore, anything that can happen, therefore, anything can happen. Therefore, everything sooner or later will happen. So therefore, time and space happen. Creation happens, individuals happen, all the little storylines play out, the whole simulation, so to speak, the whole simulation takes place. And where is all the simulation ultimately going to go? It's going to go to what are all the forms ultimately going to wind up doing? They're going to go up, they're going to ultimately recognize that they were boundless emptiness all along. And that's called evolution. That's why the past always is a lesser state of evolution. It's an earlier moment in the simulation. It's an earlier moment in the unfolding. And if we look at just a little bit of it, it can look like, it's going backwards. There's death taking place here. We had this beautiful rose, now it's dying. Yeah, but in the bigger picture, then it falls to the ground, and the ground gets fertilized, and
Yeah. I was just thinking, in the emptiness, could you say the form is an illusion? Didn't you sort of say that before you said, it's form and it's emptiness and drag or something?
Emptiness, yeah, we can say, I'm speaking kind of,
right.
flippantly, poetically there. but pretty accurately. Yeah, form is emptiness. Yeah, we could say it's an illusion. That doesn't mean it's not real.
Right.
It just means, actually, this is something I've heard Rupert Spira, teacher that we like very much, explain. Says if you look at the word illusion, right, it's from the word loose, light. Illusion just means that the light, that your light on it is faulty. You haven't clearly seen what it is. You know, like when a magician does an illusion.
Right.
It's not that what's going on there isn't real. It's just that, you know, you haven't clearly seen what's actually going on. Right? So what's actually going on here is all this form. It's not that it's not form, right? Form is no other than emptiness, and emptiness is no other than form. It's not that one is more real than the other. But because generally in, you know, human society and human understanding, as it's carried out by 99.99% of people, that all they're seeing is form.
Right.
So we emphasize a little more on the emptiness. So we sit down and we quote unquote meditate. Right? Now, actually in this context, we can get a deeper understanding of why the way that we meditate is to not try to meditate, is to give up hope and fear. By the way, can you feel yourself waiting for the helicopter to pass? And then we'll get back to something good? Now that's good.
It's evolved into nothingness.
Louder, please.
The helicopter has evolved into nothingness.
The helicopter is the form of the helicopter. And actually, yeah, practice with this stuff. Practice with this stuff. This is why it's cool to be in situations where you're stuck with something that normally you wouldn't want. Like okay, maybe there's nothing, but you know, we sit down here in the morning and all this. We've been having lots of construction noise on this block. You may have noticed one by one, all the little sweet Santa Monica cottages are getting torn down and replaced by these 2-story boxes. We may be the last holdout here.
Yeah, right.
But that means we get construction noise, starting at 8 in the morning, 5 days a week. Saturday they start at 9 in the morning. Sunday we get off. So we've been getting a lot of construction noise here for some years now. And we sit down in the morning. Yafa and I, we do some yoga. We sit down and meditate, and bang, bang. This morning I think we had jackhammers or something, and it's great. It's great because you find yourself, I find myself resisting it. Fucking jackhammers, right? And then so there it is. I hope the jackhammers will stop. I fear that they won't. Same thing. Same thing. Right? And then when if the jackhammer does stop while you're sitting there meditating, you go, this is so much better. You lose.
It doesn't mean that you can't appreciate silence or sweet birds or whatever. I mean, it's,
Right.
Decide one outcome's better than another.
Right. But what you do, no, you're right. It's human reaction. But what we do is we become more aware of this human reaction.
Right.
We get more aware of, here's my mind doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Here's my preference. I've got a preference for the sweet song of the birds at the fountain, and I've got a preference against the jackhammers. you more and more you become aware that all that stuff is just the different kinds of weather coming and going within the open sky of awareness. And it's going to be there. Waking up doesn't mean that your preferences go away. It does mean you get less caught up in them. I think Ram Dass said almost exactly the same thing in that film the other night. We get less caught up in them. We go through this enough times that even though the preferences are there, our sense of, we were saying before, of the okayness of our life is less caught up in the preference, a lot less invested in this outcome versus that outcome. It's a kind of maturity, for when, just as people get older and more mature, not always. Not always. Some of them just get more dug in. But the kind of the cliche about people be the old wise old person. This is I think a key part of what that wisdom is. That real maturity is the stuff that seemed so urgently important when you were younger. That this happened and this not happened. You kind of have the bigger picture. No, there's a kind of okayness to it all. Yeah, Yeshe?
Have you ever gotten bugged with yourself for having those...
Ever gotten?
Bugged with yourself for having those negative thoughts?
Yeah.
Quote unquote.
Getting bummed with myself, or in other words, do I ever have negative thoughts about my negative thoughts?
Right.
Sure.
That's funny.
Sure. Yeah. You go, yeah. God, here I am. I've been doing this stuff since 1968.
Yes.
And I'm sitting there, not only with the negative stuff, and I'm sitting there having these horrible thoughts about, say, a certain politician or a certain whatever, right? Or the other way, I'm sitting here, boy, having some pretty good lustful thoughts about the babes walking down on the beachfront. Yeah, welcome to being human. But all those thoughts are still, in my experience, they're all there. And it's becoming pretty clear to me that all those thoughts are there for everyone. Those thoughts were there for the Buddha. Those thoughts were there for Jesus. But the difference is they were not caught up in them. The thoughts are just thoughts. The feelings are just feelings. That's a pointing that I gave in the meditation tonight. That's really important. Our so-called meditation, our time of just sitting and being, of just resting within as this sky-like, space-like, open, free awareness. Letting, quote-unquote, stuff come and go as it comes and goes. It's going to come and go whether we let it or not. Recognizing that it comes and goes whether we let it or not. And recognizing that the thoughts that come and go are just thoughts. The feelings that come and go are just feelings. Just as the sounds that come and go are just sounds. The colors that come and go are just colors. We don't say, oh man, now we're sitting here with, what is this, beige walls. Okay, everything's great now. Good thing they're not blue walls, or that would be a bummer. Colors are just colors. Thoughts are just thoughts. Feelings are just feelings. Now, generally, that's hard to see when we're in the thick of things. That's why, in a sense, meditation is the lab. Meditation is the free space. It's the free parking space in the Monopoly game. Right? We're not in jail. We're not having to pay rent because someone else owns Park Place, or collecting rent because we own Marvin Gardens. We're just free parking. Free parking. Free. Hold on one sec. We're just in the free parking place. Then we go back onto the board. Right. This is the Bhagavad Gita. Nistraigunyo bhav. First, be without the gunas, without all the activity and the coming. Right. Just in that place of just being pure, openness, pure acceptance. Then go back into the thick of battle, but established in that free parking space. Yoga sta kuru karmani. Okay? So what it is the integration. That's why it's okay, meditation, settling into the emptiness, then we come back out into the world of form. As I said before, neither one is better or more real than the other, but because most people are caught up in form as ultimate reality, to restore the balance, we emphasize more on the emptiness. But emptiness is not the ultimate truth. The ultimate truth is the equivalence of form and emptiness, the non-duality of form and emptiness. So as Maharishi, I remember him saying once, if everyone was just sitting in caves meditating all the time, we'd be going around teaching everyone to open your eyes and engage in activity. Because what it's about is integration of the free parking, the openness, the emptiness of the free parking with all the activity and the investment and all that of all the other squares of our life.
So it's just habituated response to phenomena coming from your entire life and from previous lifetimes.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff is habituated response, we could say. And if your framework includes previous lifetimes, fine. If some people don't accept that, fine. It doesn't matter. I have no problem with the idea of previous lifetimes, but wherever they came from, and we're never going to untangle where did this habituated response come from. I mean, for example, when I eat a potato, I don't have to put I don't need salt on my potato. Okay. When I eat eggs, and I love eggs, but they have to have salt on them, or I gag on them. Okay? Now, I know people that are exactly the opposite. They can't eat a potato without salt. They eat their eggs without salt. And I'm picking that because it's such a weird, stupid kind of thing. Where the hell does that come from? It's not going to be, because your father taught you to be ashamed of your effeminate tendencies, or the stuff we get very emotionally, involved in. It's just some weird, stupid kind of arbitrary thing. We'll never get it all untangled, and we don't have to. A lot of this stuff is cultural. Because a lot of these teachings historically have come to us through the East, through India, where a lot of the culture, for example, is vegetarian. And we look to a lot of these awakened gurus are vegetarians, so that's the enlightened diet. Not necessarily. I spent some time hanging around with an awakened teacher from Jamaica. He really likes his barbecue. Conditioned response, the habituated response, whatever, is still, some of it may in fact fall away. But, we've talked about this before. Nisargadatta Maharaj, one of the most incredibly awake teachers of the 20th century, incredibly articulate teacher of non-dual reality, smoked cigarettes till the day he died of throat cancer.
Oh, cigarettes, nasty.
Yeah. So I think cigarettes are incredibly nasty.
It's filthy.
Yeah, but he was cool with it. Yeah. What else? So the main thing. What's the main thing?
Well, I was just
Yes.
thinking about the helicopter,
Yeah.
let it be the
Yeah.
let it be what it is.
Yeah.
What came in my mind was, we've all been in this. You're in an airport and they keep delaying the departure. I don't know, but when I'm going crazy and I'm fighting it. And
Yeah.
talking to strangers saying, isn't this outrageous?
Yeah.
What can I do with it?
Yeah.
It's like if I could apply what you've been talking about in that situation, just sit and look around,
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Well, guess what?
can.
You can, and I'll bet you'll get a chance to put it to the test. I'll bet you get small and large chances to put it to the test every day. And as a matter of fact, some of you heard this story a month or two ago. I was coming back from New Jersey, and there was some iffy weather, and then United Airlines had some iffy equipment situations and staffing situations, and we wound up boarding twice, sitting on the runway for hours with the air conditioning busted, 90 plus degrees, and what was supposed to be a 6 o'clock flight, and then we were on and we were off and we were on and we were off. We were there. It was now like we're there till midnight, and we're finally about to take off, and then they said, sorry, we went 1 minute over. Our flight crew's timed out, past the legal limit. We got, and at that moment, the guy sitting behind me shouted, "Fuck you!" And at this point, I'd become really good buddies with my two seatmates.
Yeah.
We'd become like old friends. This had been going on for 6 hours. On the plane, in the airport, having a meal, going back on. And we got to know each other. I got to know, she was a lawyer. She was a professor of law coming back from giving a lecture in Portugal, and she'd had a terrible flight from Portugal. He was a Porsche salesman, and two very nice people. So they knew that I was a meditation teacher. And as the hours passed, and as more and more as this hilariously horrible drama continued to unfold, I got to say they were more and more impressed with the fact that, not to brag, but just it's not I have any superpowers of coolness. It's just, what's the point? What's the point?
Can't do anything.
Yeah, I remember. This is one more story about Maggie. Actually, it just came to mind. I'd forgotten about this. We went on a trip to England in 1980 something, and we went somewhere in one of the famous London black cabs, the black taxis, and we wound up in this long line of traffic because a soccer game, football as they call it, let out, and the track was just backed up. And Maggie and I looked at each other. We're looking around. It was silent. No one was honking their horn. And we said to the driver, if we were back home in, New Jersey, everyone would be honking their horns. And the driver said, well, why would they do that? What would that accomplish?
Right, nothing, yeah.
Right? I've got a chapter about that in this book. Some of you remember the chapter called Would It Help? Would it help? No. Yeah.
When we talk about trying to meditate, trying to embrace the awareness, the acceptance,
Yeah.
the emptiness, it's to...
Yeah, speak up for the mic, please.
Okay, we talk about it in terms of dealing, how it may help us dealing with negative feelings and stress and difficult situations and death and sickness and all these terrible things. But wouldn't it also be true with the reverse? If we can kind of detach ourselves, we detach ourselves from love and compassion and caring. I mean, why would it be only in one direction? In which case, if we embrace the nothingness, we separate ourselves from humanness, not just the negative, but the positive too, to the point where we're not gonna, we're gonna loosen our grip on our feelings, on our good feelings toward other people.
Okay.
Does it go both ways?
It's a great question. It's a great question. I want to point out that you slipped a joker into the deck there. You used a word that I very pointedly never use, and that word is detachment. Okay, and you can go back, check the videotape. I guarantee you, you will never hear me use that word detachment as something that I'm advocating for. And there are wonderful teachers and wonderful books that will use that word, but I don't use it because it's so easily misunderstood. Okay, it's because it gets understood in terms of, okay, trying to separate ourselves from our emotions, or trying to flatten out our emotions. Right? I mean, that's really what I hear you describing. Like you said, okay, we're going to somehow separate ourselves from our negative emotions. That means we're going to be separating ourselves from our so-called positive
I can
emotions.
take it back. I can pull that joke out
Yeah.
and go back to the loosen the grip.
Yeah, okay, right. Loosen the grip. Now, here's the good news. And you've probably, if you really look at your experience, you'll realize that this has been going on. See, because we have these words, we think of these things conceptually. Hate is the opposite of love. Okay, that they're just two different feelings, they're two different emotions, and there's like an equivalency of them. It's a false equivalency. Love is not just a feeling. Love, compassion is not just an emotion. Most people think of it that way. It's spoken about that way. We have a million, pop songs and romantic comedies, and not just now, but going back, Romeo and Juliet, all of that, to reinforce that idea that love is a feeling, is this emotional thing that gets whipped up, between two people under certain circumstances. And then if the circumstances change, then it may not be supportable anymore and it's a disaster. That makes for some really entertaining plot lines and some really, heart-rending songs. But it's not, it's a certain kind of truth, certain level of truth, but it's not the deep truth that you're opening to in your life through Dharma practice. The deep truth is that love is our non-separateness, is that love is the growing cognition that it's not just me as a separate being over here, you as a separate being over there, like separate waves with no connection. There's only one thing here. There's only this one ocean of which we're both, wave-like expressions. That's the real intimacy. That's the real. Do you ever experience? This happens to me a lot. You know what makes me cry a lot is I remember noticing this very vividly when 9/11 happened, and when I heard about the firefighters who ran into the buildings to save people. And not just because, that's so sad and so tragic. I mean, sure that's there. But that giving themselves to something bigger. Right? Right? There's recognition of this here, right? When anytime you see something that's someone giving themselves to something bigger, there's a tendency, it makes me cry every time. And what that crying is that feeling that you have that wells up, that makes you cry, that kind of crying, which is so beautiful because it's like some bursting of your shell of individual separateness. When someone else does that, when someone else does something that you would never do it, there's no reason to run into the burning building if we're separate beings. The only reason you would do that is even if you've never had any of these Dharma discussions, even if intellectually you would never articulate it this way, but somehow on a deep level we all know this. We all know there's only one of us. And that impels us to throw our separateness, to throw our selfishness, our small self-interest into the fire. And some of us are, life circumstances that put us in that situation where we have no choice. And there's that breaking down of that shell of separateness. And that's that kind of crying. It's, oh man, that's right. I think a lot of you know what I'm talking about. That's the space that more and more it gets clear that love happens in. It's that it's not a mere feeling. So to talk about, we're going to detach from, first of all, it's nothing about detaching. And the misinterpretation that happens virtually every time when people use the word detachment is people think somehow the feeling's there, but there's something wrong with having that feeling. Really it means repress. Try to somehow not have that feeling. Try to tamp it down, be up here. If that's what we were doing, then yeah, you would be right. But that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is during the time of meditation. While we're in the lab here, yeah, whatever happens, whatever you find yourself getting caught up in, not try to get rid of it. Not try to tamp it down. Not try to detach yourself from it. Let it be there. You got no freaking choice. But don't be caught up in it. Don't oppose it. Don't hang on to it. Just be with it and everything else that's there. Just be, and there it is. The helicopter's there. Just be. Not, we're going to detach ourselves from it. We're being. It's much simpler than what you were talking about. And in that just being is where the real love arises, is where the real compassion, it's not just some feeling sorry for people. That's just another mere feeling. That's too small, that's too puny. Real compassion, feeling with, that's what the word means, is real compassion comes from the recognition that we're not ultimately separate beings. At the end of one of the Gospels, Jesus says, love one another as I have loved you. And you see people, especially people in the church, with very beautiful sincerity trying to do that. But how do you do that? You try to gin up some kind of feeling, oh, I love you so much. Oh, I love you, and it's a sincere effort, but it's an effort, which means it's not real. It's trying to feel something. There's an artificiality to it. And, and there's versions of that, in churches, and there's new agey versions of that in yoga studios, and, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. But the real thing that comes from just sitting and marinating in the simplicity of this non-practice practice is deceptive. So, what the heck is going to result from this? Well, what results is the increasingly clear recognition of the fact that everything that happens is all part of this same awareness, the same beingness. And there's only one of them, and it's not separate from what I am. Everything that I thought I was, body, thoughts, all that, is some of the stuff, some of the phenomena bouncing around within this sky-like openness, this luminous emptiness, this radiant, luminous emptiness. And we're all it. And and everything's fine. Somehow, for no particular reason, the more you marinate in that, the more it dawns on you that for no particular reason, everything's fine. And the fineness that does not arise from any reason, since it doesn't depend on any cause, can't be taken away from you. And that fineness more and more is recognized as the essence of what you are and the essence of what everyone else is, and that's love. That's how Jesus loved us. Jesus and the Buddha and Muhammad and the Baal Shem Tov, Lao Tzu. Love one another as I have loved you is, it's much bigger than much simpler. It's that recognition that I am you, and what we are is primo. So we will do this again in a week from next Tuesday. If you're on the email list, as always, you'll get an alert. So may all beings swiftly recognize that causeless, infinite okayness which we all are. I am that, you are that, all this is nothing but that, and that alone is. And thus may peace spontaneously prevail everywhere. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.